I thought I knew him. 30 years. A lifetime, really. We built a life, a home, a legacy. Then, one whispered word shattered it all. Affair. The word hung in the air, thick and suffocating, stealing the breath from my lungs. How could he? With her? I dismissed the whispers at first, but then I saw her, and that look of seduction she gave my husband. Everything I believed was a lie. Was our whole marriage a charade? Get ready to have your world turned upside down, because I'm about to tell you a story you won't believe. The Chicago air bit with a November chill, a stark contrast to the forced warmth radiating from the annual Blackwood Industries Gala. I, Eleanor Ainsworth, stood perched on the edge of a plush velvet chair, a captive audience to a conversation about quarterly earnings that threatened to bore me into a coma. Beside me, my husband, Charles, a man carved from ambition and tailored in bespoke suits, nodded with practiced enthusiasm, his eyes gleaming with the predatory gleam of a seasoned executive. 30 years of marriage, 30 years of galas just like this one. The same faces, the same stilted conversations, the same suffocating sense of obligation. I excused myself with a murmur about needing to freshen up, a flimsy pretense to escape the stifling atmosphere. The ladies' room offered a brief respite, a sanctuary of floral wallpaper and hushed whispers. I caught a glimpse of my reflection. Silver threads now dominated my once vibrant auburn hair, and the fine lines etched around my eyes told the story of a life well lived, or perhaps a life endured. But as I stared at myself in the mirror, I remembered the thrill of the chase of when Charles first courted me. That feeling of needing him, wanting him. It had been so long. Suddenly a voice cut through the muted chatter. Eleanor, is that you? I turned to see Veronica Sterling, Charles's protege, a sleek, impossibly young woman with eyes that glittered like polished obsidian. Veronica was everything I wasn't: ambitious, assertive, and breathtakingly confident. Charles had taken her under his wing years ago, and she had risen through the ranks with dizzying speed, her ascent fueling whispers of favoritism, whispers I had always dismissed as the petty envy of lesser talents. Her dress tonight was something out of a dream. It was almost as if she wasn't wearing anything, as the curves of her body danced for those to see. I immediately had to look away. Veronica, I replied, forcing a smile, looking lovely as always. Veronica's scarlet gown clung to her figure like a second skin. Thank you. You too, Eleanor. Though, you seem a little preoccupied. I laughed, a brittle sound that echoed too loudly in the enclosed space. Just the usual gala ennui. Charles is in his element, of course. Numbers and handshakes are his love language. Veronica's gaze sharpened, her obsidian eyes piercing through my practiced facade. Charles speaks of you often, Eleanor, with reverence. Reverence? The word tasted like ashes in my mouth. Charles spoke of me as one might speak of a beloved antique, valuable, cherished, but ultimately relegated to the display case. Does he? I replied, my voice betraying a hint of bitterness. As I said the words, I couldn't help but feel a sense of longing. Was Charles still the man I fell in love with? Did he still desire me? Or was I just a placeholder in his world? Veronica hesitated, a flicker of something akin to sympathy crossing her features. He admires your stability, your unwavering support. As she looked me up and down, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vulnerability. Was I still attractive? Was I still desirable? Or had I simply become invisible to Charles? Unwavering support. Another euphemism for silent acquiescence. Had I become so predictable, so invisible, that my only value lay in my unwavering devotion to Charles's ambition? Just then, a hand landed on my shoulder, Charles's familiar grip, firm and possessive. "Eleanor, darling, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." "Veronica, good to see you." His eyes scanned Veronica from head to toe, taking in every curve and detail of her body. I couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy, wondering if he still looked at me with the same desire. He steered me away, his smile radiating practiced charm. "I need you to work your magic with Mr. Henderson. The man's a notorious curmudgeon, but he adores you. A few kind words from Eleanor Ainsworth, and Blackwood Industries will land the biggest deal of the year." I forced a smile, the familiar script playing out like a well-rehearsed play. My role, the gracious, supportive wife, the silent partner in Charles's relentless pursuit of success. But tonight, something felt different. Veronica's words lingered, a nagging doubt that chipped away at the carefully constructed facade of my perfect life. Tonight, the charade felt unbearable. As Charles led me away, I couldn't help but glance back at Veronica. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something else in her gaze. It was as if she knew what was going on in my mind, as if she understood the longing and the desire that I had been suppressing for so long. The ballroom swam before me, a kaleidoscope of glittering gowns and forced smiles. Charles guided me toward Mr. Henderson, a man whose face resembled a particularly grumpy bulldog, and I plastered on my most charming smile, preparing to play my assigned role. But as I launched into my practiced pleasantries, my mind drifted, replaying Veronica's unsettling words. "He admires your stability, your unwavering support." The way Veronica spoke almost felt like a dare to break the status quo. As I was deep in thought, I saw Veronica's eyes. They were a deep, penetrating stare that made my body shiver. Was this how she and Charles talked with one another? Mr. Henderson, predictably, responded to my charm with grunts and grumbles. But Charles, ever the skilled negotiator, skillfully steered the conversation toward Blackwood Industries and its potential for explosive growth. I listened, nodding at appropriate intervals. But my heart wasn't in it. The carefully constructed narrative of my life was crumbling, revealing a hollow core of unfulfilled desires and unspoken resentments. The way he always dismissed my ideas, the way he never asked how I truly felt. It was as if he never loved me. Suddenly, my gaze drifted across the room, landing on Veronica. She stood alone near the grand staircase, her scarlet gown a vibrant splash of color against the muted backdrop of the ballroom. She stood tall and sensual as she scanned the room. It was as if she was searching for her prey. Her eyes met mine, a fleeting moment of connection that sent a shiver down my spine. There was something knowing in her gaze, a silent acknowledgement of the turmoil brewing beneath my carefully constructed facade. And for a second, I saw her hand slide down her dress, as if she was trying to feel the fabric, or perhaps her own skin. Was she trying to tease me? Just then, a waiter approached, offering a tray of champagne flutes. I gratefully accepted one, the bubbles tickling my nose as I took a long, steadying sip. The champagne offered a momentary reprieve, a brief escape from the suffocating reality of my situation. The cool glass was the only thing that was keeping me from running away. "Penny for your thoughts, darling?" Charles asked, his voice drawing me back from my reverie. "Just admiring the ambiance," I replied, offering a weak smile. As I said the words, I couldn't help but wonder if Charles knew about the turmoil that was brewing within me. Did he sense that I was on the verge of breaking? Charles chuckled, oblivious to the turmoil raging beneath my surface. "Always the romantic, Eleanor. That's what I love about you." Did he, though? Did he truly see me, Eleanor Ainsworth, the woman, not just the wife, the hostess, the asset? Or had I simply become an extension of his ambition, a carefully curated accessory to his success? The champagne swam in my head, blurring the edges of reality. I excused myself again, pleading a sudden headache. Charles, ever pragmatic, offered a perfunctory expression of concern before returning to his conversation with Mr. Henderson. His priorities clear, I slipped away, seeking refuge in the dimly lit hallway. The cool air offered a welcome respite from the stuffy ballroom. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes, trying to regain my composure. As I closed my eyes, I couldn't help but imagine what it would be like to be with someone who truly desired me, someone who saw me for who I was, not just for what I could do for them. "Eleanor," I opened my eyes to see Veronica standing before me, her expression unreadable. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice low and concerned. "I don't know," I replied, the truth spilling out before I could stop it. I feel like I'm suffocating." As I said the words, I couldn't help but notice the way Veronica's eyes scanned my body, taking in every curve and detail. Was she judging me, or was she simply admiring me? Veronica stepped closer, her presence radiating a surprising warmth. "I understand," she said softly. As she approached, I saw that her breasts were almost falling out of her dress, and I couldn't help but imagine grabbing onto them. "Do you?" I asked, skepticism lacing my voice. "What could you possibly understand about my life?" Veronica hesitated, a shadow crossing her features. "Perhaps more than you think," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "There are things you don't know about Charles, Eleanor. Things that would change everything." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. My heart pounded in my chest, a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity churning within me. What secrets was Veronica hinting at? And more importantly, did I truly want to know? As Veronica glanced at me and winked, I knew something crazy would happen. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The hallway seemed to shrink around me, the floral wallpaper pressing in like the walls of a coffin. Veronica's words had unleashed a storm of fear and suspicion within me, shattering the carefully constructed illusion of my perfect life. The tension between us became palpable, a silent understanding that something was about to change. As we looked at each other, I began to wonder, Did I want to be with Veronica? Veronica hesitated, glancing around as if fearing eavesdroppers. I can't say much, Eleanor. Not here. Not now. Just be careful. Charles isn't always who he appears to be. She then looked down at my breasts, and then slowly raised her eyes as if she was teasing me. Was she planning to do something with me? That's hardly illuminating, I retorted, my voice trembling slightly. What exactly are you implying, Veronica? Is this some kind of twisted game? Was she just messing with me? As I was in deep thought, I remembered my past and the moments that were lost. Veronica shook her head, her obsidian eyes filled with a genuine concern that belied her cool demeanor. No game, Eleanor. This is about your well-being. Just trust your instincts and be wary of anyone who flatters you with empty promises. As she leaned closer, her lips were red and her voice was sensual. It was as if she was daring me to go into the void. Before I could press her further, a wave of music and laughter erupted from the ballroom, signaling the start of the after-dinner dancing. Veronica glanced toward the sound, a flicker of apprehension crossing her features. I have to go, she said quickly. But please, Eleanor, think about what I've said, and be safe. As she was about to leave, I could see Veronica's hand rub her thigh, as if she was wanting to be touched. With that, she turned and glided back into the ballroom, leaving me standing alone in the hallway, the weight of her cryptic warning pressing down on me like a physical burden. Be safe? What kind of danger was Veronica implying? Was Charles involved in something nefarious? I remembered my marriage with Charles and how it was not like this. We were a happy, young, and lustful couple. I stumbled back into the ballroom, my gaze searching for Charles. He stood near the dance floor, his arm around the waist of a young woman with a cascade of fiery red hair. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't Veronica. It was someone else, someone I had never seen before, and it was as if he was feeling her up as she was pressed against him and they were laughing. Charles laughed, his eyes sparkling with an uncharacteristic levity. The sight of him with this stranger sent a jolt of icy anger through me. Was this what Veronica had been hinting at? Was Charles unfaithful? For years? I couldn't help but wonder if my past was also a lie. I forced myself to approach, my steps measured, my expression carefully controlled. As I drew closer, I could hear snippets of their conversation, flirtatious banter laced with veiled innuendo. I had to know. Charles, you're incorrigible, the redhead giggled, batting her eyelashes in a way that made my stomach churn. Only for beautiful women, my dear, Charles replied, his voice smooth and practiced. He turned to see my face and had an odd look in his face. Was he scared? Did he realize I could see his true nature? I cleared my throat, my presence disrupting their cozy tete-a-tete. Charles, darling, I thought you were looking for me. Charles turned, his smile faltering slightly as he registered my presence. Eleanor, what a pleasant surprise. Allow me to introduce you to Ms. Dubois. She's a potential investor. Ms. Dubois, a woman young enough to be my daughter, offered a perfunctory smile, her eyes betraying a hint of pity. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They all knew. They all knew about Charles's extracurricular activities, and I was the only one left in the dark. For a brief second, I thought they were laughing at me. A pleasure, I replied, my voice dangerously calm. Charles, I believe I'm ready to go home now. My headache is getting worse. Charles hesitated, his gaze flitting between me and Ms. Dubois. But darling, the night is still young, and Mr. Henderson is expecting me to join him for a nightcap. As he turned to me, I saw the lust and longing in his eyes. I'm sure Ms. Dubois can keep him company, I retorted, my voice laced with a barely concealed anger. I, however, need to rest. I turned and walked away, leaving Charles to stammer out a weak apology to Ms. Dubois. As I strode toward the exit, I could feel Charles's eyes burning into my back. The carefully constructed facade of my perfect life had finally shattered, revealing the ugly truth beneath. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I could no longer pretend. The ride home was a silent inferno. Charles, ever the master of self-preservation, attempted to placate me with soothing words and flimsy excuses. But I remained stonily silent, my gaze fixed on the blur of city lights passing by the window. Each word he uttered felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage, another confirmation of the lies and deceit that had festered beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect life. He was so full of it. Eleanor, darling, you're overreacting, he finally said, his voice tinged with a hint of impatience. Ms. Dubois is simply a business acquaintance. There's nothing untoward going on. As he looked at me, I couldn't help but notice that he still had some lust in his eyes, as if he hadn't gotten his fill from her. I turned to him, my eyes burning with a cold fury. Don't insult my intelligence, Charles. I saw the way you looked at her, the way she looked at you, and I heard the banter. Do you honestly expect me to believe that you were discussing quarterly earnings? She was a trollop, Charles sighed, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. Eleanor, you know I'm charming. It's part of my job. I need to be able to connect with people. It doesn't mean anything. As he said that, I thought back to the moments that I had lost with Charles. Was I a bad wife? Was I not good enough? That's the problem, Charles, I retorted, my voice trembling with suppressed anger. It never means anything, does it? It's always about the business, the deal, the image. What about us, Charles? What about our marriage? Does that mean anything to you? Charles hesitated, his gaze flitting away from mine. Of course it does, Eleanor. You're my wife. You're everything to me. As he said that, he was avoiding my gaze. It was as if he was hiding something. As he was, the words felt hollow, devoid of any genuine emotion. I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. I'm everything to your image, Charles. I'm the perfectly poised wife who smiles and nods and plays her part flawlessly. I'm the antique you trot out for special occasions, the silent partner who never challenges your authority. But I'm not a person, Charles. I'm just a prop. The silence descended again, thick and suffocating. When we finally arrived home, I practically bolted from the car, slamming the door with a force that echoed through the quiet suburban street. I stormed into the house, heading straight for the bedroom, desperate to escape Charles's suffocating presence. It was as if I needed to escape. As I threw open the door, I froze. Lying on our bed, amidst the pristine white sheets, was a single red rose. Its petals were bruised and wilted, its beauty marred by a subtle decay. My breath caught in my throat. The rose was a message, a taunt, a blatant display of Charles's infidelity. As I looked at it, I imagined him and that woman together in that bed. Fury surged through me, a tidal wave of rage that threatened to consume me. I snatched the rose from the bed, tearing it to shreds with trembling hands, the petals scattering across the floor like crimson tears. As the rose was torn apart, I was also destroyed. Charles appeared in the doorway, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. Eleanor, I can explain. Explain what, Charles? I screamed, my voice cracking with emotion. Explain how you could betray me? Explain how you could lie to me for all these years? Explain how you could turn our marriage into a cheap, tawdry joke. Charles stepped closer, reaching out to me with a pleading hand. Eleanor, please don't do this. We can work through this. I love you. Love? I spat the word out like venom. You don't know the meaning of the word, Charles. You only love yourself, your ambition, your image. You've used me, manipulated me, and lied to me for years. And I was too blind to see it. It was as if he never even cared for me. Tears streamed down my face, a torrent of grief and anger. I turned away from Charles, my gaze sweeping across the room, taking in the carefully curated decor, the expensive furniture, the trappings of a life that was built on a foundation of lies. I want you to leave, Charles, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I want you to get out of my house. I don't want to see you again. I never want to feel like that again. Charles stared at me, his face a mask of stunned disbelief. Eleanor, you don't mean that, he stammered, his voice losing its usual confident timbre. You're just upset. We can talk about this. We can fix things. As he said those words, I didn't know if he was trying to convince me or himself. There's nothing to fix, Charles, I replied, my voice surprisingly calm. The damage is done. You've broken something that can't be repaired. I want you gone. I need to be released. He stood there for a moment longer, his eyes pleading, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Then, with a defeated sigh, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing heavily in the silent house. As he turned, I almost didn't recognize him. I watched him go, a strange mixture of grief and relief swirling within me. The pain was excruciating, a deep, visceral ache that threatened to consume me. But beneath the pain, I felt a flicker of freedom. The chains that had bound me for so long had finally been broken, as if a spell was cast on me. I spent the rest of the night wandering through the house, a ghost in my own home. I touched the furniture, the photographs, the mementos that chronicled our life together, each object a painful reminder of what I had lost. I had no clue what would be coming. As dawn approached, painting the sky with streaks of pale gold, I found myself drawn to the garden. The roses, my beloved roses, stood tall and proud, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. It was as if the garden was trying to communicate with me. I knelt beside them, gently pruning away the dead leaves and wilted blossoms, a familiar ritual that offered a small measure of solace. As I worked, my thoughts drifted back to Veronica, the woman who had shattered my illusions, the woman who had, in a strange and twisted way, set me free. But did she really mean it? I wondered about her motivations, about the secrets she held. Was she truly concerned for my well-being, or was there something else, something more personal, driving her actions? As I thought that, I could almost feel her hands on my skin. Just then, I heard a soft voice behind me. Eleanor. I turned to see Veronica standing at the edge of the garden, her expression hesitant, her eyes filled with a cautious sympathy. I saw Charles leave, she said softly. Are you all right? As all right as one can be after discovering that their entire life has been a lie, I replied, my voice tinged with a bitter humor. I felt so empty. Veronica stepped closer, her presence radiating a quiet strength. I'm so sorry, Eleanor. I never wanted to hurt you. I could see the beauty and the power. It was as if she knew I was about to do something drastic. But you did, I retorted, my anger flaring anew. You shattered my world, Veronica. You destroyed everything I thought I knew. I just want to disappear. I know, she replied, her voice barely a whisper. But sometimes destruction is necessary. Sometimes you have to tear down the old to make way for the new. You said it, I said to her inside my head. I stared at her, my mind reeling. What do you want, Veronica? I asked, my voice laced with suspicion. Why did you tell me all this? What's in it for you? It doesn't make any sense. Veronica hesitated, her gaze flitting away from mine. Then, with a deep breath, she met my eyes, her expression filled with a vulnerability that surprised me. The truth, Eleanor, she said softly. The truth is, I've been in love with Charles for years. As she said it, a part of me knew that it was the truth. The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. I stared at Veronica, my mind struggling to process the implications of her confession. She was in love with Charles? But why tell me? What do you want? Veronica's confession hung in the air, thick and heavy, like the scent of rain before a storm. The idea that she, this sleek, ambitious woman, harbored a secret love for Charles was almost too much to comprehend. My world, already shattered, seemed to splinter further, each new revelation twisting the knife of betrayal a little deeper. Was this supposed to make things better? You did it for me? I repeated, my voice laced with incredulity. You jeopardized your career, potentially your entire future for me? That makes absolutely no sense. Why now? I always asked myself. Veronica stepped closer, her eyes filled with a desperate sincerity. It does to me, Eleanor. You see, I've watched you for years. I've seen the sacrifices you've made, the dreams you've abandoned, all for Charles. And it broke my heart to see you fade away, bit by bit, until you were barely a shadow of your former self. I could feel the tears in my eyes. You sound like you pity me, I said, my voice tinged with bitterness. I do feel bad for myself. No, Eleanor, I admire you, Veronica countered, her voice firm. You're strong, intelligent, and incredibly kind. And you deserve to be with someone who appreciates you for who you are, not for what you can do for them. As she said it, her hand slowly touched my face. Her hand was soft and warm. It was as if I needed to be touched again. The words resonated with a painful truth. Had I allowed myself to become so defined by Charles's ambition that I had forgotten who I was, what I wanted? Had I sacrificed my own happiness on the altar of his success? Did I even know who I was? Suddenly, a new emotion began to stir within me, a feeling that surprised me as much as Veronica's confession had. It wasn't anger or sadness or even betrayal. It was curiosity. What would be with someone who truly loved and cared for me? "What happens now, Veronica?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Charles is gone. My marriage is over. What do I do with the rest of my life? I have no clue what happens next." Veronica smiled, a small, hesitant smile that reached her eyes. "That's up to you, Eleanor," she said softly. "You can stay here, in this house, surrounded by memories of a life that no longer exists. Or you can choose to start again, to discover who you are, what you want, without Charles's shadow looming over you." As she stepped closer, I realized she meant what she said. The idea was terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly intoxicating. To start over, at my age, it seemed almost absurd. And yet, the prospect of freedom, of finally living life on my own terms, was too tempting to resist. "What even is freedom? And what about you, Veronica?" I asked, my gaze searching her face. "What are your plans? Will you finally tell Charles how you feel? It all feels so complicated." Veronica hesitated, a shadow crossing her features. "That's complicated," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "Charles and we have a history, but it's not a healthy one. He's used me, manipulated me, just like he used you. I thought I could change him, that my love could be enough. But I was wrong. You were just a fool." "So, what will you do?" I pressed, my curiosity piqued. As I thought of that, I was wondering, what was I going to do? Veronica took a deep breath, her eyes hardening with a newfound resolve. "I'm going to focus on my career," she said firmly. "I'm going to prove that I can succeed on my own merits, without Charles's help. And I'm going to find someone who appreciates me for who I am, not for what I can do for them." "You said it, Veronica." We stood in silence for a moment, two women bound together by a shared experience of betrayal and a newfound desire for freedom. Then Veronica reached out, taking my hand in hers. "Eleanor," she said softly, "I know this is a lot to take in, but I want you to know that I'm here for you, as a friend, as whatever you need me to be." As she held my hand, I realized I didn't want it to stop. The warmth of her touch sent a shiver down my spine. I looked into her eyes, seeing not malice or manipulation, but a genuine offer of support, a flicker of something more. As I look at Veronica, I could feel the urge to be with her, and in that moment, I knew that my life had irrevocably changed. The old Eleanor Ainsworth was gone, shattered beyond repair. But in her place, something new was beginning to emerge. Something stronger, more resilient, and far more interesting. And I couldn't wait to see what the future held. As I felt those words, my heart knew what was coming. She cupped my face and looked deep into my eyes, as if she knew what was going to happen. And as our lips drew near, I knew that I was no longer going to look back. As our lips drew near, I knew that I was no longer going to look back. The past, with its carefully constructed lies and suffocating expectations, was fading away, replaced by the intoxicating promise of the future. It was like I was shedding my skin and becoming someone new. Her lips were soft, hesitant at first, then growing bolder, more insistent. A jolt of electricity surged through me, awakening dormant desires I had long suppressed. It had been years since I had felt this alive, this desired, this free. The taste of her lips was better than anything. The kiss deepened, a silent exploration of shared longing and unspoken desires. Her hands moved to my hair, gently caressing my scalp, sending shivers down my spine. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the moment, allowing myself to feel everything, without reservation, without guilt. It was as if I was drowning. As the world faded around me, it was as if I was in a dream. It was as if all of my problems had disappeared. Was this the person I was supposed to be with? All of the signs pointed to it. And it was as if she understood me. We broke apart, breathless, our eyes locked in a silent exchange of understanding. The world seemed to sharpen into focus, the colors brighter, the sounds more distinct. It was as if I was seeing everything for the first time. As I opened my eyes, everything shifted. "Eleanor," Veronica whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Before she could finish, a sudden commotion erupted from the house. A loud crash, followed by a shout, shattered the intimate spell that had enveloped us. We pulled apart, startled, our senses on high alert. What was happening? Had Charles returned? We rushed inside, our hearts pounding in our chests. The scene that greeted us was one of utter chaos. Furniture overturned, lamps smashed, and in the center of the living room, a figure stood silhouetted against the moonlight streaming through the window. It wasn't Charles. It was Allison. Her face was contorted with rage, her eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen before. She held a broken vase in her hand, the shards of glass glinting menacingly in the dim light. "You," she spat, her voice trembling with fury. "You did this. You destroyed my life." Before I could react, Allison lunged forward, swinging the broken vase with all her might. As I ran forward, I felt my body slam into Veronica, and then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the floor, my head throbbing with pain. Veronica was beside me, her face pale with concern. But it was Allison who was standing above me, ready to strike. Just as she was about to do the deed, the police came. The sirens blared, and then I faded out. In the end, the truth came out. The secrets, the lies, the betrayals, all laid bare for the world to see. Charles was arrested, his empire crumbling around him. Allison, driven mad by jealousy and despair, was taken into custody. And me? I was left to pick up the pieces, to rebuild my life from the ashes of the past. But this time, I wouldn't do it alone. Veronica was there, every step of the way, offering her support, her strength, and her love. And as we stood together, looking out at the endless horizon, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together. The end.